Hey guys, hello. How are you doing? I hope you're doing good. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I hope you are ready to see the books Jen and I read in the March of April. Together in the March of April, Jen and I read a total of 14 books. Two of the books we did full reading vlogs on. I recommend both of these books. I even rated one of the books a 5 stars. So if you're interested in the reading vlogs, go check them out. I'll put links in the description below.
Hello, so I'm going to do a recap of April and what I read, but as you know, I am not a huge reader in terms of I am not reading 30 books a month, not even 10 books a month. I'm usually getting between 4, 5, 6 books a month. That's if I'm lucky. Sometimes it's been less depending on workload, life stuff, etc. I wish I had more time to read. I feel like it's a common mantra that I keep saying. But there's so many things that I want to read and are on my TBR. It just never seems to be enough time to read everything I want to read.
I read The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is the first Donna Tartt book that I've read. So if you've read her before, then you know about her writing. This is a dark academia book. You're following Richard, who is a college student starting off in this kind of private, secluded Vermont college. And he is accepted into this very small class of classical Greek students. And since there's such a small class, they stick together, they become very good friends, they get into some trouble. And then when the police start investigating, they kind of start deciding, like, are they going to stick together? Are they going to turn on each other? You just don't know what's going to happen. This is a great book. If you've read Donna Tartt's writing, you know it's a very well written. You can tell there's a lot of effort. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of... If you've read Donna Tartt's writing, you know there's a lot of effort and research that goes into this book. She reminded me a little bit of Anthony Doerr. It's just beautiful. I really want to read more of Donna Tartt's books. I read Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. I read most of this book in the month of March, but I finished it up in the first week of April. So Brim, you okay? So I finished it mostly in the month of March, I read this book mostly in the month of March, but I finished it up in the first week of April, so I'm just going to throw it in here. This is a horror book. It is written by a South American author. It's been translated to English, and if you guys watched our May TBR, you know that I love reading translated books, and this movie follows a demonic cult, and this cult, there's a young kid in this cult, and the older members of the cult believe that they can transfer their consciousness into him and continue to live. And if they can find more people, eventually they will be able to live forever, which is, one of the goals of demonic cults.
Of the list of April reads, though, I'm not going to be going over all of them in this video because they're mostly in other videos. So I had just finished The Housemaid's Secret, which we're working on a Frida McFadden vlog, so that'll be a part of that. I
am currently at my library. I was able to get a study room so that I can record and I can talk and I can edit and I can do all these fun things without disturbing anybody else. The next book on my April wrap up I'm going to discuss is a YA book. It's called 9 by Zach Hines, and this book is a dystopian book. We're following teenagers and they live in a world where you get 9 lives. Teenagers burn lives, they call it, because the further up in your lives that you go, you get more benefits in this society. But the more lives you burn, you also risk losing certain things like memories or you can't see certain colors, or you might lose your sense of taste. There's one character in this book that does not want to burn his lives, and he tries to keep people from doing it. And this is just a very fascinating dystopian story. The next book I want to discuss is a book that I read through audiobook, so I just listened to it. I don't have a physical copy, so I'm going to put a picture of it on the screen here. It's called The Book of the Most Precious Substance by Sarah Grant. This book is about a woman who falls in love and gets married and has this perfect life, but her husband starts getting dementia and he starts deteriorating. This book that all these rich, prestigious people are trying to get their hands on, because if you can complete these rituals, then you will be granted certain things in life. So she starts looking for this book. She gets dragged into really going to at all lengths to help find this book because she thinks it might be able to help her husband.
We also did The Last Housewife, which was our first vlog, and that was at the very beginning of the month, and that one is already posted.
The next book I want to discuss is a book I read physically. I borrowed it from the library, I returned it, and someone else has the copy, so I'm not able to put it up here, but I will put it up on the screen. It's The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. Jen and I did a full reading vlog discussing this book, so I will pop it up in the video if you want to go check that out. I will also put a link in the description if you want to go check it out after you see this. Next book I read physically, it's called A Flaw in the Design by Nathan Oates. And this was actually an ARC that the publisher sent me. So I always try to read my ARCs and give my reviews on them. This book I was really excited about and eventually just disappointed in. I felt like this book had so many good premises that were very interesting. It's about a 17-year-old whose parents die, so he has to go live with his uncle, and the uncle starts suspecting that this kid is crazy. He starts to suspect that this kid killed his parents. He is a professor at a college, and this kid is very manipulative. He gets into this guy's class, and you just kind of follow this, and you know, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but I don't think this book wrapped everything up. It didn't answer all of my questions. So if you like those books with the interpretive endings, then you might really like this book. I unfortunately did not like the book. The next book I'm going to discuss is also an ARC I received from the publisher, and it's called Going Zero by Anthony McCartan. This book is a thriller. It's mainly centered around the topic of privacy and how much privacy should we have to give up and at what cost. Following this woman who is competing in a test called Going Zero, and she and 11 other contestants, so 12 people total, are trying to go zero, and which means they are trying to go off grid. So they are trying to go off grid and they're trying to run from these people. On the other end, there is a tech genius that is working with the government to develop this technology to be able to track anyone, anytime, anywhere. And he's using this technology to try to track these people down. So he's trying to track them down in order to try to win this $2 billion grant from the government. And on the other hand, these contestants are trying to evade detection. And if they can survive for 30 days without being caught, they will each win $2 million. I loved this book.
We also read Those Empty Eyes, and that one's in a vlog already.
And go check out our reading blog if you're interested in learning more about this book. But I gave this book a whole 5 stars. The next book on my list is a book that I read through audiobook. It's a very short book. I'm gonna pop it up on the screen right here. It's called Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. It's really hard to talk about this book without spoiling anything because it's so short, but in the beginning, you're following a woman who is kind of a prisoner in this home, and she talks about how she's so little and the furniture is so big for her, and she doesn't think she's a prisoner, but it's very obvious, you know, she lives in a community, and it's, you know, everything's for their protection. You know, they can't go outside at night for their protection, and no one locks their doors because they're so safe and protected in this community. But what she finds out is that's not necessarily the truth. And it is sort of a story retelling. I don't want to spoil anything, but it is worth the few, you know, probably hour and a half it takes to read. It's a very short book. The book that I read in April is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Everybody's heard about this book. Everybody raves about this book. This was a buddy read that I did with my niece who is YA, and I was just disappointed. This book's been so hyped. I've seen so many 5-star reviews, but I just don't understand what the hype is all about. I'm sorry. I know, unpopular opinion. I know. I do like Holly Jackson's writing though, and I do like some of the books that she has put out. So this is not a knock on the author, but I just think this book might be overly hyped.
There's a book that I read called Looking Glass Sound, and this one was in my video for TBR for April. I believe it is the only book from my April TBR that I read, which is really sad since we only picked 5 as it is. But I'm lucky because this book, and I know it's an ARC, so no one can actually go and read this. I believe it comes out in August. It's technically horror. I have not read anything by Catriona Ward. So Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. I loved this book. This book, I don't give 5 stars. Rarely ever. If I love something, I'll give it 4 stars, but something has to basically overwhelm me, and I just love it to pieces to be able to give it 5 stars. And this book is it. I cherished this book. I felt like it was just very well written, but the best part about this, when I say well written, it's not just the language. Talking about how the plot was decided and how she put this together, because it's just so, I feel like it's so intricate and it's different than most books that I've read. And if you like David Lynch and Twin Peaks and Twilight Zone and weird things, because it's not violent horror, it's more about a horror in terms of there is murder involved, but it's horror because it's like those life situations that no one would want to experience, being around a murderer and having to worry about who a murderer is killing, and the fact that you know this murderer has killed people around you in a small town. So this is about 3 friends, and they're 16 years old during a summer, and Wilder is the main narrator. And it starts to turn into mind-bending territory because he writes about his story, but then it ends up that someone else takes his story from him when he's in college and they release it as their own. And then he goes to write his own story himself yet again. And it's really hard to describe this book. It's one of those books that you have to experience. And the characters, especially Wilder, I loved Wilder, but his relationship with the friends during that summer, and then when they're older and they come back kind of together, it's just, there's no words for this. I just love this book so much, and everyone needs to put this on their TBR. If you love horror or a thriller, anything psychological, mind-bending, this book is definitely going to check all of your boxes, and I highly, highly, highly recommend this book.
The last physical book that I read is Her Every Fear by Peter Swanson. I was gifted this ARC a long time ago, and there is a woman who lives in London, and she kind of swaps houses with her cousin that lives in Baltimore. And they both have their reasons for moving. It's supposed to be temporary, 6 months or so, just to like get away, get a new start. This woman from London, she comes to Baltimore. She's living in this really nice building with all these really nice apartments. The woman that lives next to her has been murdered. So she kind of tries to figure out what happens, and she gets herself in a situation where she needs help. It was good. I gave the book 3 stars. I felt like it was an average thriller. The last book I read in the month of April was a short novella. I read it through audiobook, so I don't have a physical copy to show you. I will put it up on the screen right here. and it's called Rolling in the Deep by Mira Grant. This book it's a dark tale about mermaids. You're following a news crew that is headed out in the ocean. They charter this boat and they are trying to prove that mermaids exist. They don't actually think mermaids exist, but they're just trying to get some views on TV, some clickbait. They're trying to, get people's interest up in this to get notoriety. They go out on this boat to try to find mermaids, and spoiler alert, they do, and the mermaids are not nice.
So that is pretty much my April recap.